Okay, here we go. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Rama Rama Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Parujaka Astoto, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa, Parujaka Astoto, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 5th day of May 2021 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are beginning chapter 11, the Universal Form, on page 459. But before we do, I promise you a review of the last chapter. But I think what we're going to do is just going to read the 4 essential verses and Arjun's 2 verses, and that way we'll give the essence of this chapter. So read I'll just read the Sanskrit and English to 8, 9, 10, beginning on 429, page 429. All right, let's see if you can answer. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mattak sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. You got it, Suresh? No, you don't. We're on page 429. Give him your book. We're just reviewing, just a quick review of the essential verses from previous chapter, okay? And now we move over to text number 9. Machita mangata prana bodhiyantak parasparam katayantascha mam nityam tushyanti chadamanti cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. Text 10. Teshang satati yuktanam bhadatam priti purvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And text 11. Teshame vaunakam partam aham ajnana jang tamaha nashayam yatma bhavasto jnana deepena bhasvata. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. And then Arjuna, in response, says, Param Brahma Param Dhama Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Shasvatam Divyam Adidevam Vibhum Ahustvam Shayak Sarve Devashir Naradastatha Asito Devalo Vyasa Swayam Chaiva Bravishime. Arjuna said, You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages such as Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyas confirm this truth about you, and now you yourself are declaring it to me. So those essential 6 verses give Krishna's declaration that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how the devotees serve him, beginning with thinking about him, Machita, and dedicating their lives and glorifying him together, and thus enjoying transcendental bliss. And on his side, Krishna, when he sees his devotees so nicely serving him, he gives them more and more intelligence about how they can come to him, and destroys with the shining lamp of knowledge from within their heart the darkness born of ignorance. And then Arjuna says, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Abode, the Purifier, the Greatest. And it's not just me saying it, but Narada says it, and Vyas says it, Asita Deva like that. So those verses are essential foundation for the whole Bhagavad Gita. If we have faith in those verses, then we'll understand Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead. The devotional service is the way to know Him, and He will enlighten us progressively depending on our sincerity. Okay, so now we'll begin text number 1 in chapter 11, the universal form. Arjuna vacha madanungrahaya paramam guyam adhyatma sangitam yatvayoktam tatastena pachaste mohoyam vigato mama madanungrahaya paramam guyam adhyatma sangitam yatvayoktam tvachastena mohoyam vigato mama. Arjuna vacha madanungrahaya paramam guyam adhyatma sangitam yatvayoktam vachastena mohoyam vigato mama. Go ahead, Glenn. Arjuna vacha madanugrahaya paramam guhyam adhyatma sangitam yatvayoktam vachastena mohoyam vigato mama. Arjuna vacha madanungrahaya paramam guhyam adhyatma sangitam yatvayoktam vachastena mohoyam vigato mama. Not yet, Hina? Okay. Arjuna vacha, Arjun said, madanugrahaya, just to show me favor. Paramam, supreme, guhyam, confidential subject. Adhyatma, spiritual. Sangitam, in the matter of. Yat, what, tvaya, by you. Uktam, said. Pachaha, words. Tena, by that. Moha, illusion. Ayam, this. Vigata, is removed. Mama, my. Arjun said, this text 1 of chapter 11, Arjun said, by my hearing the instructions you have kindly given me about these most confidential spiritual subjects, my illusion has now been dispelled. Purport. This chapter reveals Krishna as the cause of all causes. He is even the cause of the Mahavishnu, from whom the material universes emanate. Krishna is not an incarnation. He is the source of all incarnations. That has been completely explained in the last chapter. Now, as far as Arjuna is concerned, he says that his illusion is over. This means that Arjuna no longer thinks of Krishna as a mere human being, as a friend of his, but as the source of everything. Arjuna is very enlightened and is glad that he has such a great friend as Krishna, but now he is thinking that although he may accept Krishna as the source of everything, others may not. So in order to establish Krishna's divinity for all, he is requesting Krishna in this chapter to show his universal form. Actually, when one sees the universal form of Krishna, one becomes frightened, like Arjuna. But Krishna is so kind that after showing it, he converts himself again into his original form. Arjuna agrees to what Krishna has several times said. Krishna is speaking to him just for his benefit. So Arjuna acknowledges that all this is happening to him by Krishna's grace. He is now convinced that Krishna is the cause of all causes and is present in everyone's heart as the Supersoul. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So just an interesting note here on the Sanskrit. I noticed one or two of you tripped over that beginning of the verse. It has an extra syllable in that first line. There's 9 syllables. Madanugrahaya paramam. And this is sometimes used in Sanskrit to indicate high emotion, you know. Well, you find in the prayers of the gopis, the songs of the gopis in the 35th chapter of the 10th canto, a very beautiful chapter. And they start out with this nice lilting beat. Vama baha kata vama kapolo volgita mudharapata venam komalanga dibarashita margam gopi hiriyati yatra mukunda. What they're describing there is Krishna, as he's got this flute, he's holding the flute, and his left shoulder is on his left cheek. Now, I played a flute. And so that means he's got a very long flute that he's playing, that particular flute. You see? So he's got this flute which makes a very wonderful, deep sound, rich sound. So they're meditating on him as he's playing, and then the demi-goddesses in the sky are flying with their husbands in the airplanes, and they're becoming attracted. And they go on like that. But after a few verses, they add an extra little syllable in there because they're getting more and more excited. They're thinking of Krishna, he's in the forest and in separation. So after a few verses, it becomes like this. Anucharai, notice the difference. Anucharai samanavarnataviya adipurashi vachalabhuti. Vanacharogrititatation. You hear that extra syllable, that quicker beat. So that's indicating that their hearts are beating a little faster. So Arjuna's heart is beating a little faster now. He's realized Krishna is revealed as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And now his heart's really going to start beating when he sees that universal form. But not in the way that he expected. And he becomes extremely frightened at a certain point. He says, okay, enough. Now please show me your four-handed form and your two-handed form. Yes, Dr. Bob. Yes, he did. We'll soon see that in a couple of verses. Okay, if there's no questions or comments, we'll go on. Text number 2. Bhavapyayo hibhutanam Shruta vistarasho maya Tvatta kamala patraksha Mahatyam apichavyayam. O Lotus-eyed one, I have heard from you in detail about the appearance and disappearance of every living entity, and have realized your inexhaustible glories. Purport. Arjuna addresses Lord Krishna as lotus-eyed. Krishna's eyes appear just like the petals of a lotus flower. Out of his joy, for Krishna has assured him in a previous chapter, Aham Krishnasya Jagatak Prabhavak Pralayastata. I am the source of the appearance and disappearance of this entire material manifestation. That's in chapter 9, I believe. Arjuna has heard of this from the Lord in detail. Arjuna further knows that in spite of his being the source of all appearances and disappearances, he, Krishna, is aloof from them. As the Lord has said in the 9th chapter, he is all-pervading, yet he is not personally present everywhere. That is the inconceivable opulence of Krishna, which Arjuna admits that he has thoroughly understood. Okay. This is the word avyayam. I think I've mentioned in this class that the word avyayam is the most frequently used word in the whole Bhagavad Gita. And often it's at the very end of the verse. You'll find it many times, which means inexhaustible. So Krishna is avyayam. Vyaya is related to the word janma mrityu jara vyadi. Vyadi is the disease, right? Anything but inexhaustible. These bodies are exhaustible. Even if you just run a little bit, you're exhausted. So, avyayam always refers to the Lord or the spirit soul or things that are eternal like that. All right, moving along. Evametadhyata tattvam atmanam parameshwara drashtamichami te rupam aishwaram purushottama. Here it is. This is the verse where Arjuna is asked to see the universal form. O greatest of all personalities, O supreme form, though I see you here before me in your actual position, as you have described yourself, I wish to see how you have entered into this cosmic manifestation. I want to see that form of yours. Purport. The Lord said that because he entered into the material universe by his personal representation, the cosmic manifestation has been made possible and is going on. Now, as far as Arjuna is concerned, he is inspired by the statements of Krishna. But in order to convince others in the future who may think that Krishna is an ordinary person, Arjuna desires to see him actually in his universal form, to see how he is acting from within the universe, although he is apart from it. Arjuna's addressing the Lord as Purushottama is also significant. Since the Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, He is present within Arjuna himself. Therefore, He knows the desire of Arjuna, and He can understand that Arjuna has no special desire to see Him in His universal form, for Arjuna is completely satisfied to see Him in His personal form of Krishna. But the Lord can understand also that Arjuna wants to see the universal form to convince others. Arjuna did not have any personal desire for confirmation. Krishna also understands that Arjuna wants to see the universal form to set a criterion, for in the future there will be so many impostors who would pose themselves as incarnations of God. The people, therefore, should be careful. One who claims to be Krishna should be prepared to show his universal form to confirm his claim to the people. So that's a pretty good test that no one has been able to meet so far. So, although I see you here before me, actual position. So Arjuna is a devotee, and therefore he also is compassionate, and he realizes the importance of others to be convinced about Krishna's divinity. So for many people, this 11th chapter is like the high point of the Gita. It's certainly very awe-inspiring. It has the most number of longer verses, where there's a little more ornate Sanskrit, the Sanskrit is very attractive. But actually at the end of this chapter, Arjuna, he doesn't want to see the universal form anymore. It's so frightening. There's something that comes up. When Krishna is finally showing his most fierce and fearsome form to Arjuna, Arjuna is trembling and he says, "Who are you? I don't recognize you anymore, Krishna. Is this my Krishna?" So then, so Krishna says, you can imagine a deep form resounding throughout the sky, Kalos miloka kshaya kripa vidho. Time I am, the destroyer of all worlds. I've come to destroy everything. And so, I'm sure that, if there's any presentation of the Bhagavad Gita in an opera form, you can imagine the special effects they would have. So, there's an interesting sidelight to this, which I brought up before, and we'll come upon it when we finally hit that verse. And that is that some of you may know through your high school classes, or some of you may know from, well, you're not old enough, neither am I really. During World War II, there was a project to build the atom bomb, because we were afraid that the Nazis would get it. We knew they had a project. We knew they had a lot of scientists, who were working on it. So there was this knock out all the stops, and spend as much money as possible to get this done. And they put this scientist Oppenheimer in charge, and he was coordinating all these things. And it was completely secret. The Manhattan Project, it was called. Even though they've had several thousand people working, nobody leaked. There were no leaks, because they're afraid the Nazi would find out and try to sabotage it. Anyway, so when they finally had the first bomb built, and they had to test it. So it was in Alamogordo, I think, in New Mexico. Yeah. And so I read about this one time. And, their calculations were such that, it would blow up like this. We'd be behind the barriers, and, we'd be okay. We have the dark glasses on. But there's a chance that it'll blow up the whole universe. But we got to do it anyway, So. So this guy Oppenheimer, he was actually a dilettante with the Bhagavad Gita. He liked to read the Bhagavad Gita. And so when it blew up, of course it didn't blow up the universe, but it was impressive, He remembered that verse that we're going to be reading in this chapter about time I am, the destroyer of all the worlds. And I remember seeing a picture of many, many years ago from a magazine. And it was his room, his bedroom or something, and right on his bed table there was a little statue of Krishna. He was a enthusiast. Anyway, so this this Bhagavad Gita has found its way into many places we might not think, but it's this chapter we'll see is very awe-inspiring. That's what the whole idea is. Okay, text number 4. So, manyase yaditak chakyam Maya drashtamiti prabho yogeshwara tato me tvam darshayatmanam abhyayam. There's that word again, at the end of a verse. If you think that I am able to behold your cosmic form, O my Lord, O Master of all mystic power, then kindly show me that unlimited universal self. Purport. It is said that one can neither see, hear, understand, nor perceive the Supreme Lord Krishna by the material senses. But if one is engaged in loving transcendental service to the Lord from the beginning, then one can see the Lord by revelation. Every living entity is only a spiritual spark. Therefore, it is not possible to see or to understand the Supreme Lord. Arjuna, as a devotee, does not depend on his speculative strength. Rather, he admits his limitations as a living entity and acknowledges Krishna's inestimable position. Arjuna could understand that for a living entity it is not possible to understand the unlimited infinite. If the infinite reveals himself, then it is possible to understand the nature of the infinite by the grace of the infinite. The word Yogeshwara is also very significant here because the Lord has inconceivable power. If he likes, he can reveal himself by his grace, although he is unlimited. Therefore, Arjuna pleads for the inconceivable grace of Krishna. He does not give Krishna orders. Krishna is not obliged to reveal himself unless one surrenders fully in Krishna consciousness and engages in devotional service. Thus, it is not possible for persons who depend on the strength of their mental speculations to see Krishna. Now, this is very pertinent to us for practicing devotees, because by taking up the practice of devotional service under the guidance of a pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, and his books, and trying to be orthodox, because we know that we don't know anything, and therefore we should try to follow rules and regulations if we want to result. So the process of devotional service is really, it's like one big prayer. It's one big prayer. We recognize, if you pray really sincerely, it means that you can't get what you're praying for on your own. You're praying to God for dispensation, for His mercy to give you whatever it is. You may be praying for something material, good health, something, whatever. But you haven't been able to do it on your own. And that's the whole idea here, is that we cannot see God on our own. Prabhupada always quoted this verse, Atak Shri Krishna Namadi Nabave Grayam Indriyai. That Shri Krishna Namadi, Krishna's name, etc. So there's four things, they can generally in a certain order, that define every person, including Krishna. Name, form, qualities, and activities or pastimes in this case. Name, form, qualities, activities. Well, if you want to, know somebody, first thing you introduce, you want to know their name, and then, in ordinary parlance, what do you do, and what do you do for a living, in other words, what are your activities? You can see their form, and the qualities, they manifest as you get to know the person. They may be attractive or repulsive, but they define a person. So all of those are inconceivable. They're transcendental. Transcendental means beyond the range of our material senses, mind. That's the first thing to understand. So how can we know them? Only by revelation, only by Krishna's grace. He reveals himself in proportion to our sincerity. Just like the lucky few who visit this temple, like here or whatever, even if it's packed jammed before COVID or when it all dies down eventually, still it's a very, very minute number of people compared to the people, within range of the temple, So what is it that brings those people in for the great fortune of seeing the deity, tasting the prasadam, hearing the holy name, all of that comes to the temple? A certain amount of faith, developed in this life, maybe over several lives, that this is, that you may believe that, God is there. You may just think, I like the vibes, whatever it is that brings you in, and you get to see the Lord. Now, everyone sees Krishna differently, these deities, If you ever see or hear about the way Prabhupada would look at the deities, you can see he's seeing Krishna. He's not seeing a statue, he's not seeing a representation. He's seeing Krishna himself. And as Prabhupada would often say, and there are so many accounts from the Shastra, the deity will talk to you if you're pure enough, if you deserve it. You know, the famous story of the Shakshi Gopal. You read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Lord Chaitanya's trip after he took sannyas, he was with 4 other devotees, Nityananda, Gadadhar, Mukunda, and one more, I forget right now. And they accompanied him to Jagannath Puri when he went there from actually Shantipur, Advaita's place. So, Lord Chaitanya, at a certain point he stopped. They came to, was it Ramuna? I think Ramuna was the Chirachora Gopinath. But there was a place where they stopped, and I think it was Nityananda who told the story of Shakshi Gopal. So, forgive me, I still forget some of the details. So it's a wonderful story, and it's exactly pertinent to this idea of that Krishna reveals himself and reciprocates in proportion to the purity and the faith of the devotee. So there was the 2 pilgrims. One was a young Brahmin, and one was an older devotee from a town, you know. And the younger Brahmin boy was taking care of the elder, and he did so much, you know, and he felt that it was his duty. So they finally got to Vrindavan, and they came upon Gopal deity. And so the old man was so appreciative of what the young man had done to help him come to Vrindavan. And you can imagine how much he had to support him, you know. That he said, I'm going to, you know, I'm so much appreciative of what you've done that I'm going to give you my youngest daughter when we get back for marriage. You know, this is a custom. So the young boy said, no, you shouldn't promise that, because I'm just a poor Brahmin, and you're from a wealthy family, and your other family members, your wife and your son, will not be happy about that. He said, no, this is my prerogative, and you've done so much, I'm going to do it. So the young man said, okay, well, if you want to really do it, then let's go before the deity, and you can promise before the deity. So they did that. And then they made their way back to the original village, and you know, the old man went home, and the young man went home. So the old man told his family what he was planning to do, and they were his elder son said, no, that's not possible. He's so, you know, he's poor and we're rich. This is a bad match. And his wife said, if you do that, I'll commit suicide. You know, that's the main weapon they have, right? So he was puzzled now what to do, you know, so he didn't say anything. So the young pilgrim, he said, oh boy, you know, he's not saying anything. So he went to the house and he said, look, you promised before the deity, you have to do it. It's a great offense, you know. And the son, the elder son, he came at him, you know, with a stick. Get out of here. You know, this is a terrible match. So he ran away. But he knew that, you know, he himself, the young boy, wasn't, the young Brahmin pilgrim was not so, you know, fixed on the marriage, but he was fixed on this other elder Vaishnava not committing a great offense by breaking his word that he promised before the deity. So he went again and he called all the elders men together and he said, okay, how can we resolve this? So the younger pilgrim, Brahmin, he said, well, if I bring Gopal here to act as a witness, because he was there, we promised, will that resolve the issue? You know, if he witnesses it and he testifies that it's true. Because the young man was saying, no, you poisoned my father, you stole everything, you know, you're telling the stories, you know, and the elder Brahmin was afraid to say anything. He was saying, I forgot, you know. So anyway, so the older son was an atheist. Said, yeah, that's a great solution, because he figured, oh, he'll never come, you know, he'll never be able to carry the deity. Perfect. And the young pilgrim, Brahmin, he said, yeah, I have full faith. I can bring Gopal here. You know, he has to come, because he's otherwise this elder Brahmin will be in a terrible fit. You know. So he goes all the way back to Vrindavan, And he talks to he goes to Gopal, and he starts telling him the situation. I mean, I need you to come and testify. And so Gopal says, I'm a statue, how can I go anywhere? So the Brahmin says, if you can talk, you can walk. And so one lecture says, so Gopal was defeated. So he had Gopal was defeated in the logic argument. So he agrees. He says, okay, I'll go. I'll come behind you, and you cook 1 kilo of rice for me per day. And you'll know, don't look though. If you look back, I'll stop, But you'll hear my ankle bells tinkling, so you'll know I'm coming, So he did everything, that was requested of him. He didn't look, but he cooked it and he offered prasadam, So they got all the way into the precincts of the village, just outside the village. And then he couldn't hear the ankle bells anymore. And so he couldn't resist. He turned around, and there was Gopal. And he said, I told you not to look, so I'm not going any further. But that was close enough. So he went into the town, and he said, Gopal is here. Everybody come. And so they all went out into town, and there he was, and he testified. And so everything was resolved that way. And then they built a temple for him eventually. I think he was moved to another town. So the idea is that, that Krishna will reciprocate according to your faith and your devotion. And it's all voluntary on Krishna's part. We can't storm the battlements, we come in. And that goes for chanting too. I remember my brother, I tried to help him become a devotee, I don't know if he visited here, some other temple he visited. And this was many years ago. And so I said, you have to try to chant, He said, okay. So he chanted, I don't know how long, maybe 15 mantras or something. I didn't feel anything, In other words, he wasn't ready to really give it a shot. He couldn't break through, because we'd both been raised as atheists, really. He couldn't break through that. And we're both from Jewish background, and he said what completely blocks is the Holocaust. The Holocaust is when all the Jews were killed, 6 million of them. So horrific. Children, it was horrible, And logically, it's called the problem of evil in theology. How could a God who's all-powerful and all-merciful allow these innocent women, children, everyone, to be killed in such a horrible way? I don't believe in your God, And this is a common thing, is that people become atheists when they pray and pray and pray and pray, and they don't get what they pray for, materially. So that was a complete blockage for him, So anyway, for such a person, God is just a myth. This whole, Prabhupada would often talk about this. I think he saw on a magazine in an airplane once, God is dead. This God is dead proclamation, I think it was one of the French philosophers who said it first or something, What that means is that he was never alive. But the whole faith in God, the whole idea of God, which was a human construct, this is the whole existential philosophy, is now dissipated because of the war, because of what happened in World War II. 60, 70 million people killed, the Holocaust, this destruction, Where is God in all this? He could have stopped it easily, So many innocent people. So that Prabhupada picked up on that. For those who are convinced, just like we have figures in the Bhagavatam, who just, are declared enemies of God. So they will never see God except as Hiranyakashipu saw. He didn't have any faith. Where is your God, Prahlad? Where do you get your power? He realized Prahlad has power, defensive power. In spite of all the trying to hurt him, he couldn't hurt him. So he said, the same place you get your strength, Father, from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Is he in this pillar? Of course, Father. He's just like he's in your heart. He's in the pillar. Bam! Let me see him. He knocks it, hits it. Out comes Nrsimhadev. And then he had to believe. So there's a verse Prabhupada would always quote in this regard, and then we'll go on. Atapi te deva padamba judvaya pasada leshanugrita evahi janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno nachanya eko pichadam vichinvan. This is an expansive verse on the same idea. That, because here's Lord Brahma speaking this verse. Now, Lord Brahma has the greatest intelligence in the whole universe of any living entity. And yet he became bewildered when he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, there in his little form as a little calf-herd boy with some fruit in his hand. This is God. This is my Garbhodakshay Vishnu from whom I took birth. This is Mahavishnu. Didn't compute. So he tried to trick Krishna. You know the story. So after all of that, and Krishna finally revealed himself, so many Vishnu forms, you know the story. It's quite amazing. And so he was ready to offer prayers. Four-headed Brahma gets off his swan, bows down, and there's little Krishna standing there with a flute, Okay. He receives his prayers. So this is one of the prayers. And what he's saying, Atapite Deva, therefore, O Lord, unless one gets lesha, at least a little bit of mercy of your lotus feet by service, prasada, lesha anugraha evi, janati tattvam, they can understand you in truth. Which means that you reveal yourself as you are in proportion to their devotion. That's how you get the mercy. Not from any our power or strength, from your sincerity and your prayers and your submissiveness. Bhagavan Mahimno. Mahimna is what we just read about in the 10th chapter, and we'll read more in the 11th chapter. And that is the glory and the power of God, which is very popular in the West. This is the glory and the greatness and the power, which is very important to understand. But even more advanced is the mercy and the love and the delightfulness and the sweetness of God. That's more advanced. But first you have to recognize your position as a helpless servant. So, Prasada Leshan Janat Bhagavan Mihipno Nachanya Eko Pichadam Bhajinva. No one else can understand, even if you cogitate and debate and study the Vedas for a very, very long time. On your own, I'm going to investigate. Where's your God? I'll look, high and low, up and down, everywhere. No, you won't get 1 inch closer to God. Everything has to come from revelation. So that's what's happening here. Then Krishna says he's going to reveal that. I want to show you. I will show you the universal form, but you don't have the eyes to see. Krishna has to give us the eyes to see. And this is symbolic, or it's not symbolic, but it means, you have to purify the vision. You know the famous verse from the Brahma Samhita? Premanjana Chudita Bhakti Vilochanena. Bhakti Vilochanena means the eyes of love, the eyes of bhakti. Premanjana Chudita Bhakti Vilochanena Santak Sadaiva Ridiyesha Vilokayanti Yangshama Sundanama Chincha Guna Swarupam Govindamadi Purushantamaham Bhajami. Lord Brahma, that same Lord Brahma who's had a revelation, he's praying, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. Those whose eyes are coated with the salve of prema, of love, can see you within themselves as Shama Sundar, the eternal form within their hearts. Prema with the eyes of bhakti. Bhakti, Santa, the santas, the saint. Sadaiva, always. Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. Young Shamasan, Achincha Guna Surupam, with inconceivable qualities and beauty. It's Govinda I worship. So that getting those eyes of love means purifying the heart, so that you see Krishna everywhere and you long to see him internally and externally, and he eventually reveals proportionally. So now when we approach the deity, we'll all see the deity in our own way, according to our sincerity and our purity of vision. We don't see a statue. We see Krishna, and we pray, Pashupala Vadinyanandana, O Radha Krishna, children of the best of cowherd men, this single boon I beg from you again and yet again. In all the countless births my endless sins will make me meet. Let all my love flow toward your luscious, lustrous lotus feet. Hare Krishna. Okay, if there's no questions or comments, anything from outside there? Tapas? Dhanavari.
Hare Krishna, Dhanavad Pranam.
Dhanavari.
We have Dhanavadi Mataji online here, and we have 7 people watching, but I don't see any questions.
Okay. Let us go on. Now, so Krishna answers, Shri Bhagavano Vacha Pashime Parta Rupani Shatasota Sahasrashaha Nana Vidhani Divyani Nana Varna Kutinicha. The Supreme Personality of God had said, my dear Arjun, O son of Pritha, see now my opulences, hundreds of thousands of varied, divine, and multicolored forms. Purport. Arjuna wanted to see Krishna in his universal form, which, although a transcendental form, is just manifested for the cosmic manifestation and is therefore subject to the temporary time of this material nature. As the material nature is manifested and not manifested, similarly, this universal form of Krishna is manifested and non-manifested. It is not eternally situated in the spiritual sky like Krishna's other forms. As far as a devotee is concerned, he's not eager to see the universal form, but because Arjuna wanted to see Krishna in this way, Krishna reveals this form. This universal form is not possible to be seen by any ordinary man. Krishna must give one the power to see it. So this kind of, this, you'll find if you read the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, there's two kind of universal forms, that man is. One is like a big personal form. Do you remember when Vamanadev expanded in the universal form? He's this little boy. Probably calls him a dwarf. But dwarf in English, Oxford English is different from American English. Dwarf in American English is like misshapen due to disease. You can look it up, So he's really like a dwarf, using the adjective, a dwarf Brahmin. That means just a diminutive. Yeah, look it up. So anyway, he's a dwarf Brahmin. He's just a silly little boy, but he's getting charity, three steps of land. So the whole pastime with Shukracharya and everything. So he's ready to get the 3 steps of land. As soon as he gives him the 3 steps of land, suddenly he expands more and more and more, and he's in a kind of a universal form. You see the description there. The Patala Loka is on his feet. He takes 1 step and he pierces. It covers the universe, take the next second step and pierces the covering of the universe, right? And it's caused the lotion leaks in and bathes his feet, and that becomes the Ganges, right? The spiritual water again. So then he asks Bali, and where am I going to put my 3rd step? So you know what he answered. By his answer, he became a Mahajan. His answer was, put it on my head. He surrendered fully. He had already given everything. So, but that's another aspect of the universal form akin to this one, where there's a form of a person there, but within the person is all the universal things and everything manifest. But then there's a universal form described in the 2nd chapter, the Vishwarup, where you see the things of this world, like the sun and the moon as the eyes of the Lord, the bones. I remember flying into San Diego, and I'm looking out the window, and there are, the desert, and you see the rough terrain, and there's no houses. It's like what they used to call badlands or something, And I said, wow, you can see, the great forces there. And I was just remembering that how the Rocky Mountain Range, is like his bones, and the rivers are his veins. The very word for river, one of the words is vein, the same word, nadi, So that's a different kind of universal form of seeing this material world as the external body of the Lord. And the value to the sadhaka is that we begin to see everything as divine. That's the connection of everything to the Lord. And Prabhupada said this, that our bodies are like a little universe, And because they're not really alive, only because we're inside, they seem to be alive or animated, right? And we are the so-called apparent master of this body, But we're not really, because sometimes things get out of control. You think of cancer, there's a growth there that you don't want, but it's happening anyway. So we're trying to be the Lord and Master of this particular universe, and externally we're trying to control as much of the actual universe as possible. But once we realize our actual position, as humble supplicants of the Lord and His servants eternally, we can start to be regain our real identity, our understanding of who we are. Okay, should we do one more? So he's saying, see. Both 7, 5, and 6 begin with this. You see this. Pasyadityan Bashun Rudran Ashvinau Marutastata Bahunya Drishta Purvani Pasyascharayani Bharata. So in the last two verses, we've had the word Pashya appear 3 times. O best of the Bharatas, see here the different manifestations of Adityas, Vasus, Rudras, Ashwini Kumars, and all the other demigods. Behold the many wonderful things which no one has ever seen or heard of before. Purport. Even though Arjuna was a personal friend of Krishna and the most advanced of learned men, it was still not possible for him to know everything about Krishna. Here it is stated that humans have neither heard nor known of all these forms and manifestations. Now Krishna reveals these wonderful forms. Ihaikastam jagat kritsnam pashyadya sacharacharam mama dehe gudakesha yachan yadrashtum itchasi. O Arjuna, whatever you wish to see, behold at once in this body of mine. This universal form can show you whatever you now desire to see and whatever you may want to see in the future. Everything, moving and non-moving, is here completely in one place. Purport. No one can see the entire universe while sitting in one place. Even the most advanced scientists cannot see what is going on in other parts of the universe. But a devotee like Arjuna can see everything that exists in any part of the universe. Krishna gives him the power to see anything he wants to see, past, present, and future. Thus, by the mercy of Krishna, Arjuna is able to see everything. So, you remember who else saw the universal form? In Vrindavan? Yes, twice actually. Unexpectedly. She's checking to see if he ate earth. He opens his mouth and suddenly she sees everything there. The false ego, the 8 things, she sees herself with Krishna. And she's bewildered. She says, oh, I thought he was my little son. I thought Nanda was his father. And so she's losing her maternal, actually, you find your son is the whole universe in his mouth. So Krishna, he pulled the curtain of Yogamaya, so she could then feel like it. Actually, the mother, he could experience that, which is what he really wanted to get. All right, let's do one more. Natomam shakyase drashtum anenaiva svachakshusha divyam dadami te chakshu pashyame yogamaishwaram. But you cannot see me with your present eyes. Therefore I give you divine eyes. Behold my mystic opulence. Purport. A pure devotee does not like to see Krishna in any form except his form with 2 hands. A devotee must see his universal form by his grace, not with the mind, but with spiritual eyes. To see the universal form of Krishna, Arjuna is told not to change his mind, but his vision. The universal form of Krishna is not very important. That will be clear in subsequent verses. Yet because Arjuna wanted to see it, the Lord gives him the particular vision required to see that universal form. Devotees who are correctly situated in a transcendental relationship with Krishna are attracted by loving features, not by a godless display of opulences. The playmates of Krishna, the friends of Krishna, and the parents of Krishna never want Krishna to show his opulences. They are so immersed in pure love that they do not even know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In their loving exchange, they forget that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that the boys who play with Krishna are all highly pious souls, and after many, many births, they are able to play with Krishna. Such boys do not know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They take him as a personal friend. Therefore, Shukadeva Goswami recites this verse. Ittam satam brahma sukana bhutya dasyam gatanam padadaivatena mayashitanam nadadarakena Sardham Vijagru Kritapunya Punja. There's 2 last lines, Sakram and Sardham. Prabhupada would say Sardham, so that's we changed it. They're both legal. Here is the Supreme Person, who is considered the impersonal Brahman by great sages, the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotees, and a product of material nature by ordinary men. Now, these boys, who have performed many, many pious activities in their past lives, are playing with that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam 10, 12, 11. The fact is that the devotee is not concerned with seeing the Vishwarup, the universal form. But Arjuna wanted to see it to substantiate Krishna's statements so that in the future people could understand that Krishna not only theoretically or philosophically presented himself as the Supreme, but actually presented himself as such to Arjuna. Arjuna must confirm this because Arjuna is the beginning of the Parampara system. Those who are actually interested in understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and who follow in the footsteps of Arjuna, should understand that Krishna not only theoretically presented himself as the Supreme, but actually revealed himself as the Supreme. The Lord gave Arjuna the necessary power to see his universal form because he knew that Arjuna did not particularly want to see it, as we have already explained. All right, so one real quick verse. This is the sentiment of Bilvamangal Thakur, the great devotee who wrote Krishna Karnamrita, the book that's the nectar for Krishna's ears. Madhuram madhuram vapadasya vibhor, madhuram madhuram vadanam madhuram, madhugandhi madhusmitame tadaho, madhuram 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 madhuram. Sweet, sweet is my dear Lord's form, sweet is still his face so fair, but his honey-scented gentle smile is sweet beyond compare. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, very nice.
Dhanavari, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Prabhu. Excellent. Hare Krishna.
And thank you all, the internet participants.